What's up guys, Americana back with another video. Do you ever wonder what actually causes a top to form in crypto? Once you understand this one concept, the whole market will make a lot more sense. It all boils down to supply and demand. So let me break it down and hopefully you can understand how euphoric phases come to an end. All right, everybody. I know you guys probably didn't think this when you clicked on it, but you're about to get an economics 101 lesson. So what we have pulled up on the graph or pulled up on the charts here is a simple supply and demand graph. Demand is going to be in green. I feel like that makes sense. Supply in red. I don't know if I need to define this, but I will just in case. Demand is obviously going to be people searching to buy said asset. Supply is going to be people who already own said asset looking to sell. Okay, so that's how I'm referencing these things when it comes to crypto and prices and stuff like that, right? So on chart here, right, your y-axis, you have price. Obviously, if this goes up, the price is higher. If it goes lower, price is lower. And then here is Q, demand, which is just simply quantity demanded. So this slides right and left. On the right side, you have an increased demand. Typically at lower prices, you're actually going to see some sort of increased demand come in eventually. If you guys want to and scroll way back on my YouTube, this is actually a topic I'm covering for the second time. And then I have another one closely related that also dives into more of like this demand and price relationship for finding bottoms in crypto. So we're talking about finding tops right now, but I also do the inverse and show how you can find bottoms using a similar concept to this, right? This isn't necessarily something that's going to help you say next bear market, hey, I pulled up a supply and demand graph and did XYZ and it told me Bitcoin is going to bottom at $30,000, right? It goes a lot deeper than that. And it simply shows you how these things work out, what dynamics between buyers and sellers show up at different points in the market that signify, this is all hindsight stuff, but looking back at it, oh, we were in this kind of dynamic because we were seeing price appreciation before bear market where we saw this kind of dynamic where we saw prices decline. And then in a bull market, right, I see a different dynamic show up to signify that, bottom is likely to form here. This is the dynamic we're seeing between buyers and sellers, likely to see price appreciation from here. Right. So on the left hand side, we just have a very basic supply, demand, crosses right in the middle. And that intersection is where we get our price, right? Between quantity of the coins demanded and then the supply that we have to sell. And then we get our price over here. So what happens when prices rise? We'll look at Solana, for example, right? This first example I'm showing, perfect equilibrium, we'll just call that's down somewhere in here. Right. And prices go on and they rise. So what happens to this relationship when prices rise? And again, it's not perfectly true because a lot of times when prices rise, hype returns and that kind of drives demand for a little bit. When we're talking about in general, when we're talking about smart money especially, this demand or this concept kind of shows up, right? Smart money bought all down here. Do they have any demand up here? Do they have incentive to buy from anybody at elevated prices when prices have already ran 3, 4, 500, 1,000%, something like that on Solana, right? So they actually have decreased demand. They are not likely to buy, or if they do, they're going to be very specific at where they do that, right? So decreased quantity demanded. There's not as many buyers showing up. This dynamic typically marks where the top comes in, but in theory, right, this can show up as prices are elevated. If you see demand has to be higher than the supply to actually get price to come up here. But once price is up here and has settled up here, right, this is when you see these concepts show up where people who have a large amount of supply to sell will typically start letting go of some of that stuff. And even though demand from retail might have increased, right, and from smart money, they're not going to be buying in here, right? You can still see price appreciation like we show here, and these dynamics showing up where, hey, a lot of people are going to probably start selling tokens sometime soon, relatively close. Look out for it, right? And that shows up when we see a decrease in price, a drastic sell-off of price, right? We move on to something like this, which again it's the concept or the move is forecasted in here. When we see, hey, it's demand has fallen and supply has slightly increased of things like that, hey, what can we see show up next, right? Sort of sell off or something like that, and what's going to happen when that sell off occurs. And what we see here, even keeping demand relatively the same across all of these and just simply sliding around supply, right? When supply increases, if demand stays the same, price has to come down, which we see our price here, obviously coming down. And where do we see that playing out on chart? Right here. So these two concepts, as well as, if I did this inversely, price increase is relatively easy to spot. It's in between here that is a little bit nuanced, but when you're seeing price action like this, stalling out, things like that, you can assume there's some sort of shift, there's some sort of dynamic taking place that's going to lead us to this dynamic here, right? Once we've gotten through all these, right, we can move on again, and we can move on to dynamic where, hey, demand is outweighing the supply down here, right? Who bought down in here and could have sold up here? Well, they don't want to sell on this dip, and there's demand down here, right? See price actually increase. So I do want to be clear, this is a little bit of an abstract concept to apply to crypto or stocks or things like that. It doesn't necessarily work exactly like this. It's a lot more stuff that goes into pricing of these assets, such as supply on an exchange or a specific exchange or all exchanges together, stuff that we don't always have access to all the information at once. But this is kind of a generalization that I think is helpful for you guys to visualize what's happening in between buyers and sellers to give us price action that we know and love in crypto, whether it's massive pumps or 80% dumps. These are the things that cause it, right? It's not something you see, right? You're a retail investor and prices are all the way up here. We're looking at Bitcoin here. Prices are at $59,000, $69,000, and everybody's saying, hey, 100K is going to come. You're a little bit ignorant, you're retail, whatever the case is, right? Say, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. We've already appreciated so much. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that, hey, there were people buying Bitcoin at $3,000 just 2 years ago. They're likely going to want to take some of these profits. And is retail money enough to push it higher? / is there going to be new buyers or fresh money coming in at elevated prices, right? And falling while supply increases, right? Kind of dynamic shows up when that happens, right? Going to be something like this, where we see drastic drawdowns. So this is how it all ties together. It's what can trick people. But as price increases, you need to be telling yourself, hey, there's a lot of people in profit. There's going to be a lot of supply, and I need to sell my stuff before anybody else is able to, right? It's just another kind of layer that hopefully can give you more confidence and break down some of that psychological barrier holding you back from selling this cycle. All right, guys, that is it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Apologies for making you sit through that. And like I said, it's not a perfect science. It doesn't even necessarily apply one-to-one to crypto or asset prices or things like that. But I think it's a cool kind of concept to know and understand and keep it in the back of your mind that, hey, prices are down low in here, right? Probably not a lot of people who bought up in here who want to sell for a massive loss. And there's demand because price has come down 70-80%, right? Same thing. Sorry, you can't even see my chart here. Just picture I'm looking at Bitcoin's bear market bottom. But same thing shows up at bear market tops, right? Keep it in the back of your mind that, hey, it's not going to be a lot of demand because Bitcoin's at 250K, right? Look back and be like, damn, I could have bought it 16, it's at 250, I don't want it now. At the same time, a ton of people in profit, letting go of coins, massive supply, things like that. So if you guys have questions on this, let me know in the comments if you guys have, or if you guys want to see a more in-depth breakdown, something else, always down to go a little bit deeper with you guys. But we'll wrap it up there. Free materials in the bio, free Discord. Appreciate you guys, appreciate the support as always. We have been crushing it lately. Just as a YouTube channel in general, that's me and you guys, right? All the support from y'all. But let's keep getting after it. We're going to keep doing 5 videos a week. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Peace.